Hello YouTube, Thibaut Van Dam here with another YouTube video. And for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, I am a DIY singer-songwriter based in Southeast London. And today, I'm very excited to be continuing my video series all about music royalties. I started this video series a few weeks ago, and it was basically to inform other musicians, other DIY artists, and people involved in the music industry about different royalties that they could be earning depending on what it is they exactly do. And this is part of my sort of larger ambition to be more self-sustaining as a musician. And I feel like, yeah, it's a challenge to do, but royalties invariably play a really large role in sort of some of the income that you get as a musician. And I think, there are a few things that musicians end up dealing with in order to finally come around to accepting these royalties. One, is knowing about them and understanding why they should be getting them. And then the other thing is finally accepting, getting this kind of money, because it's easy to think that you're selling out when you accept any kind of money. But actually, I think it's really important to understand who's profiting from what you do, because that sort of gives you agency to say, okay, actually, all these people are making money off of me, so I think I should get a cut of it. And that's sort of where the heart of this sort of video series comes from. Also, just to keep a record of the things that I'm learning. So this is part 6 in the video series, so I've done 5 other videos. Part 4 was not about a royalty, but instead I was talking about a fundamental distinction that all royalties are governed by, which basically has to do with authorship rights and also recording rights. And I do encourage you to go check out that video if you haven't seen it already, because that's a fundamental distinction that makes all of these royalties a little bit easier to understand. I will be following a template basically where I talk about these royalties. I'll be looking at the type of royalty we're talking about today, what it's formally understood to be, how are you eligible for it, what makes you entitled to it, which is sort of that selling out thing that I mentioned. I'll also talk about how much money you can make and who you can join to get this royalty, what it will cost you. Along the way, there are certain anomalies that distinguish this royalty as different, but there are also things that make this royalty identical in some ways to other royalties. So those are going to be highlighting points. Whenever they sort of show up, I'll just draw attention to the fact that they're highlighting points, because if you can understand certain highlighting points, it makes the other royalties a bit easier to understand. But it is also important to understand why this royalty is different, what sets it apart. So I should also say, just before getting into this, that, I am a DIY artist. I'm not a music lawyer, nothing like that. So, this is all based off of my own research, my own experience. I might make a mistake. I might leave something out. If I do, write something in the comments below. And, if you do like this content, please like and subscribe, especially if you want to stay up to date with the newest videos that I'm making. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just get into it. So to start off with, I'm looking at the type of royalty we're looking at today is called a public performance and broadcasting royalty. And specifically, this royalty is accommodated for people that are recording rights holders. So like I said before, part 4 of the video series was all about the difference between authorship rights and recording rights. If you want to see that video, there'll be a link in the description. There'll be a thing in the corner. But yeah, I could go into more detail, but I think by doing that, I'm basically going to the next topic, which is what makes you eligible. So like I said, this is a royalty that's collected specifically for recording rights holders, but actually it's also collected for a different sort of demographic, which is performers on recordings. So you could technically be a performer on a recording and not officially own the recording, but you always own your own performance of it. And therefore, you would be entitled to the public performance and broadcast royalty that we're discussing today as well. But I could get a little bit more into the nitty gritty, and I think I'm going to, just because there are a few case examples where you would say, oh yeah, that actually aligns with me and therefore I should get this royalty. So to be a recording rights holder, you could be an artist, in which case you would have either had to record yourself or pay a studio for studio time to make a recording. In both cases, you own the recording, and usually recording rights are distinguished when you make a recording. It's not like there will always be, guaranteed a formal conversation, but for instance, if you're in a band, usually you and the band will have had a conversation like who owns what. And if you all mutually pay for the recording, probably in the eyes of the law, you all own an equal share of it. On the other hand, you could also be a performer, but not actually own the recording at all in a certain sense, because let's say you were hired as a session musician. This is another example where you could be entitled to this public performance and broadcasting royalty, but you actually didn't pay for the recording. That, in fact, it was the opposite. You got paid to show up. So this is an important royalty for session musicians in particular, especially because they work on a lot of recorded work. So because of that, they're involved in a lot of music, and so there's royalties generated all over the place for what they've contributed. However, there are other examples where you are neither the artist nor the performer, but you still could technically be getting this royalty because you are a recording rights holder. And the two examples I could think of, firstly, are if you are a producer. So producers, depending on how involved they are with a project, they will actually take a percentage of the recording rights. And this is because without their involvement, the recording wouldn't be what it is. And in a way, it's a little bit like George Martin's involvement with the Beatles. He was considered the fifth Beatle, and I'm almost certain that he had a cut of the recording rights only because without him, the recordings might not be what they are. And remember, that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the use of the recorded music. So that's an important thing to say, and stress, because we're not talking about who wrote the song. We're talking about who owns the recording of the performances on the song. So it's not about if you wrote this work, because for instance, George Martin might not have written any of that work, but being the producer, being part of the project, and he might have claimed something as being the recording rights holder. So yeah, it's important to remember that. There is one other example where you could get this royalty, but you probably already know this, if you are a label. Most labels actually govern on this sort of principle, which is that, when a label works with an artist, basically what's happening is they're taking an artist under their wing. They have a marketing team. They probably have, they might have an in-house studio, something like that. But what they're essentially going to offer the artist is, we will make your recordings with you. We'll work together. We'll create a product, and we're going to own some of the recording rights, which means that we're going to get some of this public performance and broadcasting royalty. But you're not going to pay for this production, or you'll pay for it, but out of your cut of the royalties. It's one of these things. It's an arrangement, but the idea is that a label could then get this royalty, this public performance and broadcasting royalty. But let's so that's sort of who gets this, who's eligible. But let's talk about like this third topic: where does the money come from, and why you should feel more comfortable accepting it. So basically, this money is earned through licensing. So in a nutshell, wherever recorded music is used, which sounds vague, but it basically means in a lot of places, those places that operate, especially as businesses, have to pay for a license. They'll pay for this license to a royalty collection society. That royalty collection society is then going to take that money and then distribute it among the artists that are registered with that collection society. See, so basically it has to do with, for instance, bars. Bars probably have music playing. If they do, they're using this music to create an atmosphere. The atmosphere is selling the alcohol and the experience of why you would even go to a bar in the first place. And so this is where the money is coming from, because instead of being like, well, we played this artist and that artist and all these other things, it's complicated. Instead, they just pay a license. So they pay for this licensing fee, and that goes straight to this royalty collection society. This also applies to wherever music is used, not only in real places, but in virtual places. So digital stores, streaming platforms, on radio, wherever it's seen on TV. If you listen to music in the background of a movie, music, again, licensing has to be applied here. So there's a lot of money in this, basically. And you got to remember that all of these businesses, for instance, Spotify's business is founded on offering people music they didn't write, music they didn't record. So they have to pay licenses to accommodate for this. And so, yeah, I mean, without this music, this recorded music that you have created, that you are the recording rights holder of, they wouldn't have a business, you see, because you're letting them profit off of what you've done. And that means, I talked about it in this other video I did, where I was talking about mechanical authorship royalties, but, Spotify is making money through advertising. They're also making money through subscriptions, This is a lot of money, and they're making it, and trust me, they're earning enough to definitely pay for this license. So you should take what's yours. So before I move to the next topic, I just want to draw up sort of a highlighting point, which is that, PPL operates a lot like PRS in a sense, except they accommodate for different authorship rights. But the important highlighting point is that basically, depending on the context and the contribution, that will sort of discern which royalty you get. So let's say you write a song, but let's say you don't own the recording. Well, then you go to PRS, But the context in this case is the same between PRS and PPL. They accommodate for wherever music is used in a public sort of way, except the difference is that with recordings, it can be broadcast over radio. You can't really, I mean, I guess you could broadcast a live performance of something, but yeah, wherever there's recorded music. But remember that wherever there's also recorded music, there's also authorship behind that recorded music. For instance, you can't have a recording of a song that no one wrote. That sounds nuts. So wherever there's a recorded work, there's also an author. So yeah, these royalties tend to go together. But that's sort of a highlighting point. Let's move to this next topic. 4. It's quite a simple topic, which is how much can you make? Well, this is another highlighting point. How much you make is based off of usage. If you listen to more, you make more. If you listen to less, you make less. However, with this royalty in particular, there's a few anomalies that make this kind of different. Depending on how much music you have, what your repertoire is like, recorded music that is, are there other recording rights holders, and also are there other performers? This can determine how much money you get. Fundamentally, in terms of money, you can expect a similar amount to PRS. So I gave the example of what I was doing, which was, I was playing an open mic for about 15 minutes a week. Every quarter, so every 3 months, I was getting paid about £50. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it's a real amount of money. And surely, you can imagine with recorded music, it's used a lot more than live performance. So you got to keep that in mind. Another thing I should point out, and it's just a specificity of this royalty, the way the money is distributed, is that there's this public performance broadcast royalty that is collected. It is then divided equally between the recording rights holders and the performers on the recording. So basically, let's say there's 5 performers on this thing. That 50% is not getting cut into 5 pieces, basically. So every performer is getting 10%. That's what they're getting. And then you look at this, the recording rights holders, so there's only one recording rights holder. Well, that person's going to get the 50%. If you are the recording rights holder and a performer, well, then you'd get 50% plus your 10%, 60%. See? So it's important to remember that. So again, remember that the performer's royalties are not affected by the recording rights holders, basically. I mean, no, they're not actually. So you could be a performer, basically, and you could be getting money, and you just have to register. And that leads me to the next point, which is who do you join? What will it cost you? So this is part 5. So to join, you will need to join a company. Well, you'll have to join a company called PPL, otherwise known as Phonographic Performance Limited. I wrote that down because I didn't want to get confused. And I have joined PPL. There are a few weird things about joining PPL. The first thing I'll say, which is always a good thing, I'll start with the good news, is that it's free. So when you join PPL, you won't have to pay anything, which is great. However, you will need to provide ID to prove who you are. You'll also have to prove that your music is being used, your recorded music is being used, and through that, they'll be able to identify who the recording rights holder is because it will be associated with your distributor and the ISRC code. And yeah, it could be as simple as providing a YouTube link, a Spotify link, but you also have to fill out some tax forms. And if you are a U.S. citizen, it is complicated because I have a tax obligation to the U.S., and so filling out tax forms is not fun because it's just, I don't know, it's just nerve-wracking. The IRS is like the mafia. So anyway, the final thing that makes joining PPL a little bit more complicated is that when you join, you actually have to choose whether you want to join as a recording rights holder, a performer, or both. And if you do join as both, you'll have to fill out 2 forms. It's not that complicated to do both forms. It's just another form you have to do. Also, you'll have to print out the form and sign it and scan it and then email it back. So there are a few things you got to go through, but once you've registered and once you've registered your repertoire, all the recorded works that you are associated with, you'll never have to do that again. This royalty will be, earned in perpetuum forever. And that's kind of that final thing that I always want to say, that it's like, you got to remember all royalties are earned cumulatively and in perpetuum. So as you continue to make more music, you will continue to make more money. As you continue to, and that amount of money will add up, and also, as you make more music, your music will get used more, presumably, because people will say, oh, wow, it's the first album. Let's go listen to the one, the second album. Let's go listen to the first album now, that sort of thing. So that just about covers everything I wanted to talk about with this royalty. PPL is a big deal, I'd say. I can't think of what the equivalent is in the US, but PPL, it's really simple and straightforward. The good thing also about PPL is that they are now affiliated with MCPS and also PRS. If you want to find out about those, then I'll put a link in the description. I'll put a thing in the corner. PRS, I think, was the second video I did in the series, and I think MCPS was the 5th video. So, I'll put links sort of everywhere, and you can check those out if you'd like. I hope you found this video interesting and helpful. If you did, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. It does motivate me to make new content. I should also say, as like a final thought, that this is one of the last sort of major royalties to talk about, really. There are other royalties and there are other sort of organizations you can join, which I'm going to do dedicated videos about. But this just about covers all of the royalties that you should be thinking of when you are either a performer or recording rights holder. I hope you liked the video series. I will see you at the next video. Thanks so much for watching, and ciao for now.